Irashaimase! Hello and welcome to Fataris' Kitchen. I'm your host, Chef Fataris. It's time once again for Shoot 'em Up Saturday, and on the menu this Saturday we have Task Force Harrier, an obscure arcade classic. What kind of taste will it have? Let's get cooking and find out. From developer UPL, Task Force Harrier released to arcades in 1989. 2 years later, in '91, we would get a Sega Genesis port titled Task Force Harrier EX, and that version is different from the arcade version. It adds some new mechanics, and it's the one that has the most information out there about it. The actual arcade title seems very obscure, and it's possibly because this is just a relatively mediocre shoot 'em up in a lot of ways. I did enjoy my time with it, but one thing I do have to say, I don't like the soundtrack. That said, the gameplay is fun and reminiscent of other titles like Tiger Heli. So let's have a look at it, and if you're interested in it, of course, this is available on the Nintendo Switch and the PlayStation 4, so definitely check it out. So here we find ourselves at the screen we get once we enter credits into the machine. This game is 2 players simultaneous, so that is how we'll show off the game. Although you have to start with 1 player, and then once that's the case, you can start with the 2nd player. So your base abilities are really simple, in the arcade version especially. We have our anti-air shot, which is basically just our normal shot, and then we have a bomb. Fortunately, Hamster was very thoughtful in their control scheme, and if you press the right trigger, then you get both your bomb and your shot together at once. Really nice, like a quality of life improvement. So real quick, it's possible to upgrade both your normal shot and your bomb, as well as change up your bomb to one of 3 different types. And there's actually quite a bit of upgrading you can do. So the main shot can go all the way up to level 7, though it is going to be difficult to achieve that sometimes, as this game is actually fairly difficult. And for our other 2 upgrades, one of which I haven't talked about, it's possible to upgrade your bomb and we'll refer to them as satellites, or well, like wingmen, or however you wish to refer to them. It's possible to upgrade those to level 3. So, I mentioned that there's different types of bombs. There are also different types of wingmen as well. We've got the kind that offers, well, a little bit of like a wiggly shot. That fires those like blue shots next to your Harrier, and those ones, once you upgrade them past level 1, will gain a kind of this V shot, which is actually very useful for coverage. Upgrade it from level 1 to level 2, and you'll have even greater, it'll be like a double V shot, so a lot of coverage. The other 2 satellite wingmen that you can get, one is the homing missile, which does a good job of hunting down enemies, and for the weaker enemies does a good job taking them out. Then the final one is your straight missile, or rocket, which fires a more powerful rocket that just fires straight forward. Although that one is rarer, and we don't see it until a few stages into the game itself. As far as the bombs are concerned, there are 3 bombs, and as far as the items you'll get to upgrade them, they're like basically labeled Bomb 1, 2, and 3. So Bomb 1 is an anti-surface bomb. It's what you start off with by default, and it's just those couple explosions, or as you upgrade it, additional explosions in front of your fighter. Bomb 2 is this neat missile which kind of has almost a napalm effect trailing behind it, which is really useful because it has the greatest range of the 3. And then the last one is Bomb 3, which is like just a really big bomb. And admittedly, that's the one I do like the best, just because it's just all these big explosions. What's not to like about that? As far as so there's Bomb 1, so that's the one we currently have. So this S up, that's actually for our shot, and it's possible to upgrade that, as I mentioned, all the way up to 7. So we should be coming up against our first, or not against, but with our first Bomb 3 power-up. And Bomb 3 gives you this like big explosion in front of you. It's, like I said, the one that I enjoy using the most. The icons for your wingmen are a bit different though. They're like medals or pendants depending on which power-up they are. So I kind of appreciate that there is some difference to the different power-ups that we have. So here we find ourselves at the boss of the first stage, or second stage, depending on how you want to look at it. Really, the game is broken up each stage into 2 sections, where you have an air section, basically trying to get to your ground target, and then the section where you're actually fighting the ground target. One thing that's like kind of problematic about both is the enemies we face throughout the course of the game are extremely tanky. Kind of appropriate in this case, as it is literally a pair of tanks. But we can like dump shot after shot after shot into these enemies, and it seems like they persist forever. And that's the case with the sub-bosses that we encounter in the air stages as well. The game itself also starts to ramp up quite a bit in difficulty as it progresses. Between stages, we have this neat little refueling section where they like refuel our Harriers, rearm us, I'm assuming, and bam, off we go. So you get points for the percentage of enemies you destroy in the stages themselves, starting at 40%. Once you are above that, then you receive a 10,000 point bonus. It definitely is easier to play this game 2-player, as you just have that much more damage going into the enemies, but even still, there are some bosses that will be difficult to take out just because they have so much HP. The game itself does have some pretty good length though, since both like, or rather since each stage has like 2 sections to it, the air assault stage and the ground assault stage. You'll ultimately like end up with like 14 stages total, as there's 7 stages in the game. Once you complete your first loop, you're started in on a second loop, and at that point it's kind of like, alright, I've had enough, let's move on. That said, from a visual standpoint, the backgrounds aren't very inspiring, but I really like the sprite work in this game. And it's one thing that's actually a little disappointing about the Genesis version, is just due to a difference in color between the arcade machines and the Sega Genesis / Mega Drive. Everything kind of just had a washed out look when I did try the Genesis version. So ultimately, what's my verdict on Task Force Harrier? If you're looking for a vertical scrolling shoot 'em up you might not have encountered before, this one could be an interesting one to try out. It has some like fun elements on it, but ultimately gets frustrating in how its difficulty spikes and just how much damage you have to deal to a lot of these enemies to really like progress through the stages. So that's my biggest like minus flavor, is just how like tanky some of the enemies are. But equally as problematic is the soundtrack. So I'm not sure what sound chip this arcade board had on it, but it was not a good sound like chip at all. Or the composition of this title is just not good. The soundtrack is just, at some points it's almost like just like horrendous to listen to it. But like if you have something else playing in the background, or maybe if you can like survive that, it's like a decent title, and one that like if you're alright with just pumping quarters in the machine, can be fun to just do a playthrough on. As far as the plus flavors are concerned, I really do like the sprite work in the game itself. That's one of the things that is really enjoyable, is just seeing all the different designs for the enemy aircraft and tanks that they've come up with, as some of them are pretty unique. Like the one for this next stage, the TX Flame Tank, that one's kind of a neat little design. But basically, that is Task Force Harrier served up for your enjoyment. Well, that'll just about wrap it up for this week's episode of Shoot 'em Up Saturday. As always, I want to thank you so much for joining us this week, and I look forward to seeing you again next week.